I've always loved a good story of triumph in the face of adversity. Houston, we have a problem. The boy who lived. With great power comes great responsibility. All good stories have three basic elements: the characters, the conflict, and the resolution. Let me tell you about a true epic tale of the modern day, a tale with a villain and a hero. The story is called When the Earth Moves, the Growing Threat of Climate-Driven Floods and Landslides. As we begin our story, we must first introduce the setting and the characters. For the setting, we understand that the climate is getting hotter, but how does that come into play with hazards like floods and landslides? Well, for every 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in the global temperature, we get 4% more water vapor in our atmosphere. The increase of water vapor in our atmosphere leads to an increase in rainfall intensity. And this increase in rainfall intensity leads to more frequent and more severe floods. This increase in rainfall intensity also leads to more frequent and more severe landslides. So the characters in our story, the antagonist, are water, floods, and earth, landslides. I am specifically interested in the earth antagonist, the rainfall-driven landslides. Now to introduce the conflict. Like the conflict of all great stories, the antagonist wreaks havoc and creates destruction and misery. Landslides are highly destructive geological hazards or geohazards. Landslides can involve the movement of several million tons of earth. That's enough soil to fill up 6 domed football stadiums. So think of the Georgia Dome, filled from floor to ceiling with soil 6 times over. Landslides are also very costly. According to the United States Geological Survey, the USGS, the direct economic cost for landslides is $2 to $4 billion in the U.S. annually. I will say again, $2 to $4 billion. The Kentucky Geological Survey estimates $10 to $20 million in economic costs due to landslides in Kentucky alone. The USGS also estimates that the direct human cost of landslides is 20 to 40 fatalities and hundreds of severe injuries in the U.S. annually. At this point, we're left wondering, what can we do about these hazards? From the vantage point of the story that I'm telling you, you have to ask yourself, who will save us from this hazards, these rainfall-driven landslides? Who will save us? Well, now it's time to introduce the hero of our story. The hero of our story is advanced science and technology. And rather than being affiliated with the Justice League, our hero is affiliated with CLIMBS. Climate resilience through multidisciplinary big data learning, prediction, and building response systems. Okay, I know that doesn't roll off the tongue. But what is CLIMBS? CLIMBS is a $24 million National Science Foundation project that is focused on advancing the fields of climate science, geohazard engineering, and disaster management. The goal of CLIMBS is to improve the sustainability and resilience of our communities in the face of climate change. Okay, back to our hero, advanced science and technology. Our hero is equipped with 3 strong weapons to use in this battle: spatial analysis, remote sensing, and artificial intelligence. Now, let's get a mission brief on the first weapon, spatial analysis. In our context, spatial analysis is the Geographic Information Systems Technology, or GIS. GIS is used to analyze and display information over a large area. In geohazard research, GIS is used to analyze and display data from multiple sources for a specific community. These data, when viewed as individual data sets, they seem not to provide any insight whatsoever into how and where landslides occur. But when viewed over a common area, they can truly advance our understanding and knowledge of landslides and landslide behavior. Okay, mission brief on weapon number 2, remote sensing. Remote sensing is a technology that allows us to collect data on locations without physically touching the locations. A remote sensing tool used in geohazard research is the airborne LiDAR, or light detection and ranging technology. LiDAR uses lasers to create highly accurate models of the Earth's surface down to the centimeter level scale. Drones with LiDAR capability can collect clouds of 3D data points, which are used to create 3D digital models of a scanned area. These models, when viewed, look like they're pictures or images, but in actuality, they're just a collection of very dense data points. Now, drones with LiDAR are powerful remote sensing tools, but the true game changer in geohazard research has been the introduction of spaceborne remote sensing. NASA's Soil Moisture Active Passive Satellite Mission, or SMAP for some of you satellite nerds, is a low-orbit satellite capable of obtaining soil moisture in the top 5 centimeters of soil. Another satellite mission is the IMERG constellation satellites. The IMERG constellation is used to estimate rainfall amounts and patterns across the entire Earth's surface. So what do you get from this remote sensing tools and the spatial analysis tools? What you get is you get a surface topographic map of a landslide site with knowledge of the surface geology at centimeter level resolutions. You also get some basic information on the atmospheric and subsurface conditions at the specific sites. Now, although the tools that I've described thus far are powerful weapons for our hero, advanced science and technology, the true advance that we're using at the CLIMBS project is that concept of artificial intelligence. That is the tool that integrates the other tools. That is the third weapon. Artificial intelligence is used to analyze large data sets from multiple sources, just like sensing imagery, or data from geological maps, or even data from ground-based monitoring stations. AI identifies patterns and complex relationships within the data difficult to detect using traditional methods such as statistical methods. When applied to landslide studies, AI learns by looking at locations where landslides occurred and at locations where landslides did not occur. AI discerns the patterns and trends of both locations to identify the commonalities associated with each separate area. What we get from AI, by applying AI to landslides, the tool that we use is the landslide susceptibility map. And as the name implies, a landslide susceptibility map tells us what areas are susceptible to landslides and what areas are not susceptible to landslides. We use landslide susceptibility maps for long-term land use planning. We also use landslide susceptibility maps to reduce the climate-driven geohazard risk for our vulnerable communities. Now, whereas the landslide susceptibility maps are true powerful tools and allows us to see where landslides are most likely to occur, the cutting edge research being done by the NSF Climes Project is working on the landslide hazard maps, which will tell us when landslides will most likely occur. Landslide hazard maps are dynamic tools, meaning that they reflect the change in moisture content and rainfall at specific sites. Again, looking at the research being done by the NSF Climes Project, we aim to be able to forecast rainfall and soil moisture at a specific site at very high resolutions several days in the future. Think of your 5-day forecast on your evening news. But rather than forecasting rainfall, you forecast landslides. And you forecast landslides at resolutions, say, along the size of your neighborhood. You can see that landslide hazard maps will revolutionize emergency management and planning by allowing us to see into the future and predict where and when landslides will occur. Landslide hazard maps allow us to identify high-risk areas, enabling governments, communities, and emergency responders to implement early warning systems, evacuation plans, or at the very least, implement mitigation strategies to reduce the risk of loss of life or property damage. Planners, engineers, and policymakers will use landslide hazard maps to guide long-term future development, assuring that roads, buildings, or other critical infrastructure are placed in safer locations or designed with stabilization measures taken into consideration at the onset of the design process. First responders and emergency management teams will use landslide hazard maps to prioritize their actions so that they can efficiently and effectively allocate critical resources at the places and times before, during, and even after landslides occur. So, as I have presented, you can see that the advanced science and technology being supported by the Climes Research Project will provide incalculable benefits to society, thus producing a hero that can truly fight this growing threat of climate hazards that is plaguing humanity. As we close, just like the end of all good stories, in the end, the hero vanquishes the antagonist and sets all the wrongs right. At the end of our story, advanced science and technology has provided us with tremendously greater insights to how and where landslides form, and will give us the ability to predict when landslides will occur. Thus, advanced science and technology applied to the growing threat of climate-driven floods and landslides will enable us to create climate-resilient communities, but more so, ultimately, enable us to save lives. Thank you.